The massive ship moved through space like a floating city. Its dark metal hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could destroy entire planets. This was the flagship of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire, and today it carried news that would change everything. Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back. His purple skin gleamed under the blue lights of the command center. Like all Zephyrians, he was tall and thin, with large black eyes that could see in many different colors. He had served the Empire for over 200 years, conquering world after world for his masters. "Admiral," called out one of his officers, "we have the scout reports from the Outer Rim territories." Kextar turned slowly. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 847 star systems across the galaxy. For over 3,000 years, they had been the strongest power in known space. No species had ever successfully fought back against them. The Empire's technology was too advanced, their fleets too large, their weapons too powerful. "Show me," Kextar said in his deep voice. A hologram appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed a small yellow star with several planets around it. The third planet from the star was blue and green, covered with water and land masses. "This system is designated Sol 3, the officer explained. "The third planet shows signs of primitive life. Our scouts have been watching them for several months." Kextar moved closer to the hologram. He could see the planet slowly spinning. "What kind of life?" "Bipedal creatures calling themselves humans," the officer replied. "They appear to be in the early stages of technological development. They have basic space travel within their own system, but no faster-than-light capabilities. Their weapons are mostly kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives." Another officer joined the conversation. "They seem to be a violent species, Admiral. Our scouts observed constant warfare between different groups on their planet. They fight over resources, territory, and ideas." Kextar's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Primitive savages fighting among themselves. How typical. He studied the rotating planet more carefully. "Population? Approximately 8 billion individuals spread across all continents," came the reply. "They have built many cities and appear to have basic industrial capabilities." 8 billion potential slaves, Kextar mused. "The Empire can always use more workers for the mining operations." The first officer brought up more data. "Their technology is roughly equivalent to what most species have when we first encounter them. Chemical rockets, basic computers, primitive, energy weapons. Nothing that should pose any challenge to even our oldest ships." Kextar nodded. In his long career, he had seen this same pattern dozens of times. A primitive species would be discovered, usually still fighting among themselves. The Empire would send a small fleet to demand surrender. Most species would give up immediately when they saw the superior technology. Those that didn't would be quickly crushed. "What about their military capabilities?" Kextar asked. "Very basic," the officer replied. "They have what they call navies that operate on their oceans and air forces that fly in their atmosphere. Their space presence is minimal, a few small stations and some mining operations in their asteroid belt. Defenses? Practically non-existent in space. They have some surface-to-air weapons and basic radar systems, but nothing that could threaten a starship." Kextar walked around the hologram, studying the planet from different angles. It looked peaceful enough with white clouds swirling over blue oceans. Hard to believe such a beautiful world was home to violent primitives. "Any notable characteristics about these humans?" he asked. The officer consulted his datapad. "They appear to be remarkably adaptable. They live in every climate on their planet, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. They also seem to recover quickly from conflicts. Our scouts observed several major wars, but each time the humans rebuilt their cities and populations within a few decades." "Stubborn," Kextar said, "but stubbornness means nothing against superior firepower." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then another officer spoke up. "Admiral, there is one unusual thing. The humans seem to study warfare as if it were an art form. They have thousands of books about military strategy and tactics. They build monuments to their warriors and tell stories about their battles." Kextar made a dismissive gesture with one of his arms. "All primitive species glorify violence. It's what they do before they learn to submit to a greater power. The first officer cleared his throat. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Kekstar thought, for a moment. This seemed like a simple operation. One planet, primitive technology, no allies. The Empire had subjugated hundreds of worlds exactly like this one. "Prepare a standard subjugation fleet," he commanded. 20 cruisers, 5 dreadnoughts, and my personal command ship should be more than enough. We'll give them the usual ultimatum. Surrender or face annihilation. Yes, Admiral. Shall I prepare the standard terms? Of course. Complete surrender, immediate disarmament, and preparation for integration into the Empire as a client species. They can keep their planet and some level of self-governance if they comply quickly. The officer nodded and began entering commands into his console. The fleet can be ready to depart in 3 standard days. Kekstar turned back to the hologram of Earth. Such a small, insignificant world. The humans probably didn't even know that. Other intelligent life existed in the galaxy. They would be shocked when the Empire's ships appeared in their skies. "Send a probe ahead of us," Kekstar ordered. "Have it deliver our ultimatum in their primary languages. Give them 72 standard hours to respond." "What if they refuse to surrender?" asked one of the younger officers. Kekstar looked at him with amusement. "Then we demonstrate the power of the Empire. A few orbital bombardments should convince them to reconsider. If not, we'll conquer them the traditional way." The bridge crew began preparing for another routine conquest. They had done this so many times before that it had become almost boring. Another primitive world, another easy victory for the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Kekstar remained standing by the hologram, watching the small blue planet spin slowly in space. In a few weeks, it would be just another world under Empire control. The humans would learn to serve their new masters, just like every other species had before them. He had no way of knowing that the humans had been watching the probe that had been watching them. He had no idea that what the Empire considered primitive weapons were actually the result of thousands of years of constant innovation, driven by endless warfare. And he certainly couldn't imagine that the humans had been preparing for this moment for longer than he realized. The probe launched toward Earth, carrying an ultimatum that would change the course of galactic history. But as it traveled through space toward the small blue world, the humans were already preparing their response. And that response would shock the Zephyrian Empire to its very core. The probe arrived at Earth exactly when Admiral Kekstar had planned. It was a sleek silver device about the size of a small building, equipped with powerful transmitters and basic defensive systems. As it entered Earth's solar system, it began, broadcasting on all frequencies. In the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah Chen watched the alien probe on her screens. She was a short woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. Around her, dozens of technicians worked at computer terminals, tracking every movement of the alien device. "Signal coming in on all bands," reported her communications officer. "It's using mathematical concepts to establish basic communication protocols." "Put it on the main screen," Chen ordered. The large display at the front of the room lit up with symbols and images. The message was simple but clear. The probe showed pictures of vast space fleets, powerful weapons, and conquered worlds. Then, it displayed an image of Earth, followed by symbols that could only mean surrender or destruction. "Translation is complete, General," the linguist called out. "They're calling themselves the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. They claim to control over 800 star systems. They're demanding our immediate and complete surrender." General Chen studied the message carefully. "How long do we have?" 72 hours by their count," came the reply. "They want us to broadcast our surrender on the same frequencies they use to contact us." Chen turned to her aide, Colonel Rodriguez. "Get me the president, and contact all department heads. Full alert status across all services." As her staff worked to implement the alert, Chen thought about the years of preparation that had led to this moment. Humanity had known this day would come eventually. The signs had been there for decades. Strange energy signatures detected by deep space telescopes, radio signals that seemed too organized to be natural, and unexplained objects moving through the outer solar system. Some people had called it paranoia, but the world's governments had quietly begun preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. Research into advanced weapons had accelerated. Military strategies had been developed for fighting enemies with superior technology. And most importantly, humanity had learned to work together. "General," called out her intelligence officer, "we're getting reports from observatories around the world. Long-range sensors are detecting a fleet of ships moving toward us. Estimated arrival time is 68 hours. Chen nodded grimly. Right on schedule, just like the message had promised. How many ships? Initial count suggests around 30 vessels of various sizes. The largest ones are enormous, bigger than anything we've ever built. Any signs of additional forces? Not yet, but our deep space sensors are limited. There could be more ships we can't detect. Chen walked over to a secure communication terminal. Get me Admiral Morrison at Fleet Command. Within minutes, she was connected to the head of the newly formed Human Defense Fleet. Admiral Morrison was an old friend who had served with her in several Earth conflicts before the Great Unification. Sarah, Morrison's voice came through clearly. I assume you've seen our visitors? Hard to miss them, John. What's the status of our forces? All ships are in position and ready. The crews have been briefed and are standing by for your orders. Chen felt a grim satisfaction. For the past 20 years, humanity had been building ships in secret. Not the obvious ones that alien scouts might see, but hidden construction facilities throughout the solar system. Asteroid mining operations that were really shipyards. Scientific stations that were actually weapons platforms. Transport ships that carried far more than supplies. Remember the plan, Chen said. Let them make the first move. We need to see what their technology can really do. Understood. Our people are ready. Chen ended the call and turned back to her staff. Prepare our response to the alien ultimatum. A few hours later, the probe received humanity's answer. It was broadcast on the same frequencies the aliens had used, but the message was much shorter than they probably expected. The transmission showed the image of a human soldier holding an ancient Earth weapon. Below the image were words in simple, Galactic Standard language. Come and take it. Admiral Kextar received the message aboard his flagship as his fleet approached the human solar system. His forearms trembled with anger as he read the translation. Impossible, he said to his bridge crew. No primitive species has ever refused our ultimatum. Perhaps they don't understand the consequences, suggested his first officer. Then we'll teach them, Kextar replied coldly. All ships prepare for orbital bombardment. We'll start with their largest cities. The Zephyrian fleet entered Earth's solar system with weapons charged and shields raised. 25 cruisers and 5 massive dreadnoughts moved in perfect formation toward the small blue planet. Their hulls gleamed with advanced armor and their weapon ports glowed with deadly energy. Admiral, called out the sensor operator. I'm detecting some small ships moving in the asteroid belt. They appear to be mining vessels. Kextar barely glanced at the display. Ignore them. Focus on the planet. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, more human ships became visible. They were crude-looking things compared to Zephyrian vessels. Blocky and angular where the alien ships were smooth and curved. Most were painted in dull colors with numbers and symbols that meant nothing to the invaders. Admiral, the sensor operator called out again, sounding confused. I'm reading weapon signatures from those human ships. What kind of weapons? Kextar asked with amusement. Kinetic projectiles, sir. Very primitive. Some kind of metal slugs fired at high velocity. Kextar laughed, throwing rocks at starships. How pathetic. He turned to his weapons officer. Target the largest human vessel. 1 plasma burst should be enough to vaporize it. But before the Zephyrian ship could fire, the human vessel launched its own attack. A stream of metal projectiles shot out from its front section, moving faster than anything the aliens had ever seen. The tungsten rods hit the Zephyrian cruiser's shields at nearly the speed of light. The energy barriers that had protected the ship against plasma weapons and particle beams simply couldn't handle the kinetic impact. The shields failed instantly, and the metal projectiles punched through the ship's hull like bullets through paper. Atmosphere rushed out of the holes as the cruiser began to tumble. Emergency lights flashed across its damaged hull as its crew tried desperately to control the damage. Impossible, Kextar shouted. How can primitive kinetic weapons penetrate our shields? His question was answered by more human ships opening fire. Metal projectiles streaked through space from dozens of different directions. The humans had positioned their vessels throughout the solar system, hidden among asteroids and behind planetary bodies. Now they emerged like predators attacking a herd. The Zephyrian ships tried to return fire, but their plasma weapons were designed for long-range space combat. The human ships were fast and maneuverable, darting in close where the larger alien vessels couldn't bring their main guns to bear. One human ship rammed directly into a Zephyrian dreadnought, its reinforced hull cutting deep into the alien ship's side. As it pulled away, the human vessel launched dozens of small projectiles into the wound it had created. The projectiles exploded inside the alien ship, sending fragments through its corridors and destroying critical systems. "Admiral," his communications officer called out. "We're losing ships. Request permission to retreat." Kextar stared at his display in shock. Half his fleet was already damaged or destroyed. The humans were fighting like nothing he had ever encountered. They used their ships as weapons, attacked from multiple directions at once, and showed no fear of dying in battle. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They're just primitives." A human voice came over the communication system, speaking in perfect Zephyrian. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. Surrender your ships immediately or we will destroy every one of them." Kextar looked around his bridge at the faces of his terrified crew. Everything he had believed about human weakness had been wrong. These weren't primitive savages. They were something far more dangerous. "All ships," he said quietly. "Emergency jump to hyperspace. Retreat immediately." Only 6 ships escaped the battle. The rest were either destroyed or captured by the humans. As his damaged flagship limped away from Earth, Kextar sent an urgent message back to the Empire. "The humans are not what we thought," he reported. "They are something else entirely, something we have never encountered before. We need to warn the Empire. We need to prepare for war." The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Council had been called within hours of receiving Admiral Kextar's distress signal. The great chamber deep inside the capital world of Zephyr Prime was filled with the Empire's most powerful leaders. Representatives from hundreds of conquered species sat in the lower tiers, while the ruling Zephyrian nobles occupied the elevated platforms. Emperor Thexval stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient form draped in robes that sparkled with embedded technology. At over 500 years old, he had ruled the Empire longer than most species had existed. His dark eyes, now clouded with age, had seen the conquest of countless worlds. "Bring in the survivor," the Emperor commanded. Admiral Kextar entered the chamber, his head held low in shame. His uniform was torn and burned from the battle, and one of his forearms hung uselessly at his side. The assembled nobles whispered among themselves as they saw the proud admiral reduced to this broken state. "Speak," the Emperor said simply. Kextar stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I must report a complete failure of our mission to subjugate the human homeworld. Of the 30 ships in my fleet, only 6 escaped." A shocked silence filled the chamber. In 3,000 years of expansion, the Zephyrian Empire had never lost an entire fleet to a primitive species. "How is this possible?" demanded General Vexmoth, the Empire's supreme military commander. "Our intelligence reports indicated the humans had no advanced technology." "The intelligence was wrong," Kextar replied. "The humans have weapons unlike anything we've encountered. They use kinetic projectiles fired at relativistic speeds. Our shields, designed to stop energy weapons, are useless against solid matter, moving at such velocities." One of the noble counselors stood up. "You're telling us that a species without faster-than-light travel defeated our most advanced warships?" "Not just defeated," Kextar said quietly. "Annihilated. They fought with a coordination and ferocity I've never seen. They used their own ships as weapons, ramming our vessels without hesitation. They showed no fear of death." Emperor Thexval leaned forward on his throne. "Show us the battle recordings." The chamber's central hologram activated, displaying the chaotic scene of the battle near Earth. The assembled nobles watched in growing horror as human ships tore through the Zephyrian fleet like predators hunting prey. They saw cruisers cut in half by tungsten rods, dreadnoughts crippled by ramming attacks, and fighters swarming damaged ships like insects. "Pause the recording," the Emperor commanded. The image froze on a human ship deliberately crashing into a Zephyrian vessel. Analysis of this tactic? General Vexmoth studied the image carefully. It's crude but effective. No civilized species would sacrifice ships and crews so readily. It suggests the humans value victory over individual survival. Or they understand something about warfare that we've forgotten, said Admiral Kextar. "Fiat," Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Your Majesty, in our thousands of years of conquest, we've grown accustomed to easy victories. We arrive, we demonstrate superior technology, and primitive species surrender. We've forgotten how to fight an enemy that refuses to yield." A representative from one of the conquered species, an insectoid creature called a hive mind, spoke up from the lower tiers. "If I may, Your Majesty, my people fought the humans in simulations during our early contact studies. Even in virtual battles, they never stopped trying to find ways to win, no matter how hopeless the situation appeared." The Emperor gestured for the creature to continue. "The humans study warfare as both science and art. They have preserved knowledge of thousands of conflicts spanning their entire history. They learn from every battle, even defeats. Their military academies teach strategy from wars fought with primitive weapons, but the principles remain relevant." General Vexmoth scoffed. "Primitive strategies are useless against advanced technology." "Are they?" asked Admiral Kextar. "The humans used our own assumptions against us. We expected them to fight like every other species, to panic when faced with superior forces. Instead, they were prepared for our arrival." The recording resumed, showing the final moments of the battle as the surviving Zephyrian ships fled into hyperspace. The human vessels didn't pursue, but their message was clear. They had won decisively. "This humiliation cannot stand," declared Lord Zexkrin, one of the most powerful nobles. "The reputation of the Empire is at stake. If word spreads that humans defeated us, other conquered species might rebel." Emperor Thexval nodded slowly. "You are correct. This threat must be eliminated before it spreads." He turned to General Vexmoth. "Assemble the Grand Fleet." The general's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, the Grand Fleet hasn't been mobilized since the Titan Wars 2 centuries ago. That level of force seems excessive for one primitive world." "Does it?" the Emperor asked coldly. "Admiral Kextar lost 24 ships to these primitives. How many more losses are acceptable?" The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Grand Fleet represented the combined military might of the entire Empire. 50,000 ships drawn from every sector and every conquered world. "Begin immediate mobilization," the Emperor commanded. "Every available vessel is to be pressed into service. Contact our allied species and demand their contribution of ships and crews." General Vexmoth bowed. "It will take several months to assemble a force of that size, Your Majesty." "Then we have time to study these humans more carefully," the Emperor replied. "I want complete intelligence reports on their capabilities, their psychology, and their weaknesses. Leave nothing to chance." As the council session ended and the nobles dispersed to carry out their orders, word of the human victory began to spread throughout the Empire's territories. On 100 conquered worlds, enslaved species whispered excitedly about the impossible. News. On the water world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like cetaceans shared the news through their sonic networks. For the first time in generations, they spoke of hope. In the crystal caves of Silica Prime, the rock-based mineral people passed the information through their geological communication systems. The humans had done what they could never do: stand up to the Empire and win. On the jungle world of Verdant, the plant-based Flora Collective rustled with excitement as the news spread through their root networks. Perhaps the age of Zephyrian dominance was finally ending, but not all the Empire's subjects welcomed the news. Some species had grown comfortable under Zephyrian rule, enjoying the stability and protection it provided. Others feared that challenging the Empire would only bring harsher treatment. The mechanical species of Gear World calculated that human victory was statistically impossible and dismissed the reports as propaganda. The energy beings of Plasma Station believed that any species capable of defeating the Empire must be even more dangerous than their current masters. Meanwhile, in the deepest vaults of Zephyr Prime, ancient weapons were being awakened. Technologies that had been sealed away since the Empire's founding were brought out and examined. Planet-killing devices, reality-warping weapons, and tools of mass destruction that had been deemed too dangerous for normal use. Emperor Thexval stood in one of these vaults, studying a weapon that could destroy entire solar systems. "Perhaps it's time to remind the galaxy why we rule," he said to his advisors. General Vexmoth looked uncomfortable. "Your Majesty, these weapons were banned by the Galactic Accords. Using them would make us no better than the ancient destroyer races." "The Galactic Accords were written by the victors of old wars," the Emperor replied. "We are about to write new history. The humans will learn that some enemies are too dangerous to defeat. They can only be completely destroyed." As the Empire mobilized its forces, Admiral Kextar was given a new mission. He would return to human space, but this time as part of an armada so vast it would blot out the stars. The humans had won their first victory, but it would be their last. The assembled fleet would carry weapons capable of cracking planets and burning solar systems. Every ship would be equipped with the Empire's most advanced technology. Nothing would be left to chance. But as the Empire prepared for total war, they failed to consider one crucial factor. The humans weren't just preparing for the return of the Zephyrian fleet. They were preparing for the arrival of something far more dangerous than Admiral Kextar could imagine. The battle for Earth had been just the beginning. The real war was about to start. The largest fleet in galactic history approached the Sol system like a moving constellation. 50,000 ships of every class and design spread across space in a formation that stretched for millions of kilometers. At its center flew the massive command vessel Emperor's Wrath, a ship so large it had its own artificial gravity and internal weather systems. Emperor Thexval stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the small yellow star grow larger on his screens. Around him, hundreds of officers from dozens of different species worked at control stations. The bridge was a symbol of the Empire's diversity, conquered races working together under Zephyrian rule. "Status report," the Emperor commanded. "General." Vexmoth approached, his expression confident. "All ships are in position, Your Majesty. We have vessels from every sector of the Empire. The firepower we've assembled could destroy 100 worlds. And the humans? Long-range sensors show minimal activity in their system. A few patrol ships, some orbital installations around their homeworld. Nothing that could threaten even a single squadron of our fleet." The Emperor nodded with satisfaction. This time there would be no mistakes. The humans had surprised Admiral Kextar with their crude but effective weapons, but the Empire had learned from that defeat. Every ship in the fleet now carried shields specifically designed to deflect kinetic projectiles. Their weapons had been upgraded to fire faster and at longer range. "Open a channel to all human frequencies," the Emperor ordered. Throughout the Ando Sol system, every radio, television, and communication device suddenly carried the same message. The image of Emperor Thexval appeared on screens around the world, his ancient face filled with cold authority. "People of Earth," he began, his voice translated into every human language. "I am Emperor Thexval of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. You have made a grave error in resisting our first contact. The fleet you destroyed was merely a patrol force. What approaches you now is the combined might of 1,000 conquered worlds. On Earth, in the command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Chen watched the transmission with her staff. The main screen showed the impossible sight of the alien armada, thousands upon thousands of ships filling space like a metal cloud. "You have one final opportunity to surrender," the Emperor continued. "Lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to receive our occupation forces. Any resistance will result in the complete annihilation of your species and the sterilization of your world." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. General Chen turned to her communications officer. "Any word from our deep space assets?" All stations report ready, General. The fleet is in position. Chen nodded and activated her own transmitter. This is General Chen of Earth Defense Command. We hear your ultimatum, Emperor Thexaval. Our response remains the same as before. The transmission that reached the Emperor's flagship was brief and to the point. It showed the same image as before, a human soldier with an ancient weapon, and the same simple message. Come and take it. Emperor Thexaval's face darkened with rage. Insolent primitives. They think their previous victory makes them invincible. He turned to his weapons commander. All ships begin orbital bombardment. Turn their planet into molten rock. But before the first shot could be fired, something impossible happened. Space around the Zephyrian fleet suddenly filled with human ships. They appeared from everywhere at once, from behind asteroids, from the dark side of planets, from areas of space that had seemed completely empty moments before. Thousands of vessels materialized as if they had been ghosts becoming solid. Impossible! General Vexmoth shouted. Where did they come from? The answer became clear as more ships continued to appear. The humans hadn't just been building vessels in secret, they had been building an entire hidden fleet, ships constructed in the dark between planets, in hollowed-out asteroids, in facilities that existed in the cold depths of space, where no one would think to look. But these weren't the crude, blocky vessels that had defeated Admiral Kextar. These ships were sleek and deadly, covered in armor that seemed to shift and change color. Their hulls were marked with symbols and numbers, but they moved with a precision that spoke of advanced computer control. Admiral Morrison to all human forces, came a voice over the communication channels. Execute Battle Plan Omega. Show them what happens when you threaten our home. The battle began with a coordinated strike that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about space combat. Human ships didn't attack in the orderly formations that civilized species used. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects, hitting the alien fleet from every direction at once. The kinetic weapons had been upgraded too. Tungsten rods accelerated to 90% of light speed punched through the new Zephyrian shields as if they didn't exist. But now the humans had other weapons as well. Plasma cannons that burned holes through armor, gravity bombs that crushed ships like tin cans, and something entirely new. They're boarding us, screamed a Zephyrian captain. Human soldiers are cutting through our hull. This was something no one in the Empire had expected. Space combat was supposed to be fought at long range with energy weapons and missiles. No, civilized species tried to board enemy vessels during battle. It was too dangerous, too primitive, too savage. But humans, it seemed, had never stopped practicing close-quarters combat. They came through the hull breaches in powered armor, carrying weapons that could cut through any material. They moved through ship corridors like they had been born for this kind of fighting. Emperor Thexaval watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart. Human boarding parties weren't just destroying ships, they were capturing them. Zephyrian vessels began turning their weapons on their own allies as human soldiers took control of their bridge systems. How are they doing this? He demanded. An intelligence officer answered with a trembling voice. Our analysis suggests they've been studying our technology from the ships they captured in the first battle. They know exactly how our systems work. And their tactics? They fight like no species we've encountered, Your Majesty. They coordinate attacks with impossible precision, but each ship also acts independently when needed. It's as if every captain knows what every other captain is thinking. The truth was even more impressive than the Zephyrians realized. Human ships were connected by quantum communication networks that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. Every vessel shared tactical data in real time, creating a fleet that fought as a single organism while maintaining the flexibility of individual units. But the real shock came when the human troops began capturing Zephyrian officers alive. This was another thing that civilized species didn't do: take prisoners during space battles. Captured enemies were usually killed or left to die with their ships. The humans, however, had different plans. They dragged Zephyrian captains and crew members to human vessels, where they were immediately interrogated by soldiers who spoke perfect Zephyrian and seemed to know everything about Empire military procedures. They're extracting tactical information, reported one terrified Zephyrian commander. They know our fleet compositions, our standard formations, even our emergency protocols. Emperor Thexaval realized with growing dread that the humans weren't just defeating his fleet, they were learning from it. Every captured ship provided them with more technology to study. Every prisoner gave them more information about the Empire's capabilities and weaknesses. All ships retreat, he commanded. Emergency jump to hyperspace. But the humans had prepared for this too. Some of their vessels had been equipped with gravity generators that could disrupt hyperspace jumps. Ships trying to escape found themselves pulled back into normal space, where human forces were waiting for them. Emperor called out his navigation. Officer, we can't jump. Something is interfering with our hyperspace drives. Around them, the great fleet of the Zephyrian Empire was being systematically destroyed. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds were being torn apart by human weapons they couldn't understand or defend against. And through it all, human voices could be heard on the communication channels, speaking in dozens of different languages as they coordinated their attacks. They had learned to speak the languages of every species in the Empire, and now they were using that knowledge to spread confusion and fear among the alien crews. This is impossible, Emperor Thexaval whispered. They're just one species. How can they be so effective? General Vexmoth, his uniform torn and bloodied from an explosion on the bridge, provided the answer. Because they never stopped fighting, Your Majesty. While we grew comfortable with easy victories, they continued to wage war against each other. They've spent thousands of years perfecting the art of combat. As his flagship shuddered under another human attack, the Emperor finally understood what they were facing. The humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. A race that had turned warfare itself into their greatest strength, and now they were bringing that strength to bear against an empire that had forgotten how to fight against an enemy that refused to surrender. The battle for the Sol system lasted 6 hours and ended with the most devastating defeat in galactic history. Of the 50,000 ships that had comprised the Zephyrian Grand Fleet, fewer than 100 escaped. The rest were either destroyed or captured by human forces. Emperor Thexaval sat slumped in his command chair aboard his damaged flagship, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete annihilation of his forces. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to keep their ship operational as human vessels closed in from all sides. Your Majesty, called out his communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through, the Emperor said quietly. The main screen lit up with the image of a human woman in military uniform. She had gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to see right through him. When she spoke, her voice was steady and confident. I am Admiral Morrison, of the Human Defense Fleet. Emperor Thexval, your fleet has been defeated. Surrender your vessel immediately, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. The Emperor almost laughed. Laws of war? These humans spoke of laws while destroying the greatest military force in galactic history. And if I refuse? He asked. Then you will share the fate of your fleet, Morrison replied simply. The choice is yours. Emperor Thexaval looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were all watching him, waiting for orders that might save their lives. For 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had never surrendered to anyone. I surrender, he said quietly. Within minutes, human soldiers in powered armor were cutting through the hull of the Emperor's flagship. They moved with the same deadly efficiency they had shown throughout the battle, securing the ship section by section. When they reached the bridge, the Emperor was surprised by what he saw. The human soldiers were professional and disciplined. They didn't kill his officers or destroy his equipment. Instead, they carefully secured the area and began downloading data from the ship's computers. Admiral Morrison herself came aboard to accept the surrender personally. She was smaller than the Emperor had expected, but there was something in her presence that commanded respect. Emperor Thexval, she said formally, I accept your surrender. Your crew will be treated as prisoners of war and given proper care. Why? The Emperor asked. Your species has just won the greatest victory in galactic history. Why show mercy to your enemies? Morrison studied him for a moment before answering. Because that's what civilized beings do. We fight when we must, but we don't kill when killing is no longer necessary. As human forces secured the captured vessels, the scope of their victory became clear. They had not only defeated the Empire's fleet but had captured most of it intact. Thousands of advanced warships now flew under human command, crewed by volunteers, from the many species that had served the Empire. But the real shock came in the days that followed, as human fleets began appearing throughout Zephyrian space. The ships that had seemed to materialize from nowhere during the battle had been just the beginning. Humanity had been preparing for this war for decades, building hidden shipyards and training secret fleets. On the mining world of Ferris, human ships dropped out of hyperspace and broadcast a simple message to the enslaved workers below. You are free. The Empire's rule is ended. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the planet, beings who had lived their entire lives in bondage looked up at the sky and saw something they had never thought possible: liberation. On the ocean world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like cetaceans sang songs of joy as human vessels took control of the orbital platforms. For the first time in generations, they could swim in their seas without fear of imperial overseers. The plant-based beings of Verdant rustled with excitement as human soldiers helped them remove the technological restraints that had prevented them from reproducing freely. Their forest cities bloomed with new growth as they celebrated their freedom. But not every world welcomed the human liberation. Some species had grown dependent on imperial rule and feared the chaos that might follow its collapse. Others worried that the humans might prove to be worse masters than the Zephyrians. On the industrial world of Mechanica, the robot-like inhabitants calculated that their production quotas were more efficiently met under imperial management. They requested that human forces leave them alone to continue their work. The humans surprisingly agreed. They had not come to conquer but to liberate. Species that chose to maintain their previous way of life were allowed to do so, as long as they didn't threaten others. This puzzled many of the former imperial subjects. Every species they had known used victory to impose their will on the defeated. The humans seemed different. They offered freedom but didn't demand submission in return. On Zephyr Prime, the imperial capital, the news of the fleet's destruction sent shockwaves through the government. Without their military to maintain order, rebellions broke out on hundreds of worlds. The empire that had ruled for 3 millennia was collapsing in a matter of days. The Zephyrian nobility gathered in emergency session, trying to salvage what they could from the disaster. Some called for negotiation with the humans. Others demanded the use of their most terrible weapons, including devices that could destroy entire solar systems. But it was too late for such measures. Human agents had been operating throughout imperial space for longer than anyone realized. They had infiltrated governments, made contact with resistance movements, and prepared the groundwork for the Empire's collapse. When the Zephyrian High Council tried to activate their ultimate weapons, they found that the control systems had been sabotaged. The devices that could crack planets refused to respond to their commands. Admiral Morrison stood in the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime, having accepted the surrender of the entire Zephyrian government. The great hall where countless species had been forced to kneel before their conquerors was now quiet and empty. "What will happen to us?" asked one of the Zephyrian nobles. "That depends on you," Morrison replied. "War crimes will be prosecuted. Those who are guilty of genocide or slavery will face justice. But ordinary citizens who simply lived under imperial rule have nothing to fear. And our worlds will be free to govern themselves as they choose. Humanity has no desire to replace the empire with another empire." This concept was difficult for many to understand. Power, once seized, was traditionally held forever. The idea that the humans would voluntarily give up control of conquered territory seemed impossible. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that the humans were serious. They established temporary administrations on former imperial worlds only long enough to ensure peaceful transitions. Then they withdrew, leaving the inhabitants to determine their own futures. Some worlds chose to form new alliances with Earth. Others decided to remain independent. A few even asked to rejoin a reformed Zephyrian government, though this time as equals rather than subjects. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity kept its promises. Species that had expected new masters instead found themselves free to choose their own paths. In the end, the human victory accomplished something that 3,000 years of imperial rule had failed to achieve. It brought true peace to the galaxy. Not the peace of subjugation, but the peace that comes when peoples are free to live as they choose. Emperor Thexval, now a prisoner aboard a human ship, watched reports of his former empire's transformation with a mixture of sadness and wonder. He had spent his life believing that only force could maintain order among the galaxy's diverse species. The humans had proven him wrong. "Admiral Morrison," he said during one of their conversations, "I must ask, how did you know we would come?" Morrison smiled. "Because that's what empires do. When challenged, they escalate. We've seen it throughout our own history. The pattern never changes. But how were you ready for us?" "Because we learn from every fight," Morrison replied. "Every battle teaches us something new. Every enemy makes us stronger. That's what happens when you never stop fighting." The Emperor nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand what his scouts had missed about humanity. They weren't just another primitive species. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a people who had made warfare into an art form, then used that art to bring peace. As human ships patrolled the former imperial territories, ensuring the safety of newly freed worlds, a message went out across the galaxy. It was broadcast on every frequency in every language to every species. "To all peoples of the galaxy," the message began, "humanity extends its hand in friendship. We offer trade, knowledge, and mutual protection to any who desire it. But know this: Earth remembers, and Earth does not forgive those who would enslave others. We have shown what happens to those who threaten the innocent. Let this be the last time such a demonstration is necessary." The message ended with an image that would become famous throughout the galaxy. A human hand extended in friendship, but with weapons clearly visible on the belt. The meaning was unmistakable. Humanity offered peace to those who wanted it, but war to those who chose aggression. And in the depths of space, on worlds that had never known freedom, beings looked up at the stars and knew that someone was watching over them. The age of empires was ending, and the age of freedom had begun. The galaxy would never be the same.